And Michael, you did mention Tom DiChiaro of the winery. Just as you have announced a primary challenge for the Republican line in the election to incumbent Supervisor Susan Siegel, who, of course, is the endorsed candidate of the Yorktown Republican Party, Tom DiChiaro likewise has announced a primary challenge to the two town board candidates who have been endorsed by the Republican Party, that being longtime Councilman Nick Bianco and Dave Paganelli of Travelers Rest. So my question there is, since you and Tom DiChiaro seem to have very, very similar platforms regarding pro-business, will you in some sense be running together during this primary challenge?
Well, I think we are of like minds on a lot of this. I think, I think Tom's particular experience with the town is sort of the poster child of what everybody has been talking about for years and the frustration with the town. And why do I say that? Here you had a structure, a historical structure, which was basically abandoned for a good period of almost 30 years, maybe even longer, 35 years. When I first started with the town in the 80s, that church was already been boarded up.
And that was called the Old Stone Church, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's a beautiful, beautiful architectural building, and it's been abandoned. And Tom's predecessor in title put an enormous amount of money.
It's Mike Palmietto.
Palmietto, right? And likewise, I'm sure with Mr. DiChiaro as well. And if you've been there, you'll go into it. They've done a beautiful job with it. It's absolutely it's stunning. And here you have a piece of property that somebody is looking to take out of mothballs, redevelop, put back on the tax rolls, and make a major investment in at very to no environmental cost in terms of anything, because it's just a redevelopment of a piece of property. The town should have rolled out the red carpet for Mr. DiChiaro on this thing, and instead, he's more familiar with what his saga is than I am. But instead, there was enormous amount of resistance. There were lawsuits. It became ugly at times. And I think the town spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in trying to keep him from opening up, which is just absolutely, and this sends a message to everyone. And I think that it was through 3 administrations that there was the opportunity to do the right thing in regard to that piece of property. It was the tail end of the Cooper administration. Donnie, it depended during Donnie's administration.
Don Peters, yeah.
And even this current board never really acted on it. Eventually,
so you're saying under Susan Siegel.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
It ended up being the zoning board of appeals that did it. That gave him his special use permit. But this is the culture of the town of Yorktown. So when you drive down 202 from Lexington Avenue to the DeConnick Parkway, and you see one empty storefront after empty storefront and a weed overgrown lot, this is the consequences of a culture that has been prevalent in this town for a very long period of time, and that is basically that if you're going to come into the town of Yorktown to develop, you have to be very well financed and for a very long haul, because basically the culture here is that we don't want it. And I think that is also reflected in the fact that if you look at the properties it's not only properties that are laying vacant, but there's also properties that are completely taken off the tax rolls, bought and taken off the tax rolls. And what you have an ongoing depression of the total overall assessed value of properties in the town of Yorktown, and especially in terms of commercial base. And how does that translate to the everyday taxpayer? Well, the town doesn't have to go do any additional spending and your taxes will still go up because the tax burden is going to be shifted from what is now a depressed, deteriorated, or completely absent commercial tax base, and now it's going to be the residential tax base that has to make that up, and that's exactly what is happening. So it's and if you're a developer, and if you're coming into want to develop in the northern Westchester area, you have choices. You have choices between Cortland, Somers, and Yorktown. And I think given the culture of Yorktown, most developers either decide between Somers or Cortland, and Yorktown just becomes the drive-through town.